Welcome to Spirit School. I'm your mentor, Danielle Sarank, also known as the Squamish Medium. In this podcast, I share honestly all I have learned about the mediumship and spiritual development journey. My intention is to normalize these conversations, to make way for a more confident, clear, and connected wave of lightworkers, serving the world of spirit with an open and joyful soul. Welcome again to Spirit School.
Hello, Spirit School listeners. We're so excited to be here today. Sharla and I, both mentors here at Spirit School, decided we wanted to do an episode together and kind of share with all of you some experiences we've had in the world of developing our spiritual life and our spiritual practice, while we are also balancing having our full-time human jobs and trying to manage the energy of both, because we know that a lot of you out there, a lot of listeners also experience this and are also trying to navigate the best way to do that. So we thought it would be awesome to kind of share some things we've learned, some experiences we've had, and some tools that we've picked up along the way to help us along. And we thought it would just be awesome to share that with all of you. So welcome. How are you, Sharla?
I'm great, Payton. Thank you for the beautiful introduction. It's great to be here chatting with you and really excited to open up this conversation. I think it was probably we're looking at maybe a month and a half ago that I messaged you and said, I have an idea for a podcast that I think will be relevant to a lot of listeners in the Spirit School community. And it was around how we balance our full-time lives and jobs, along with also developing spiritually, which I think you just said beautifully. And today, we've had this on the calendar for a few weeks now, right? This was our date that we were going to record it. And in my human brain, I'm like, oh, I will have so much time to organize my thoughts around this conversation. I will have the ability to have my questions all in a row for Payton, what we want to explore. And I literally came into this conversation today with my hair on fire and with so much chaos in the background that I feel the energy of this conversation is for those listeners that, you feel like you're going through the motions of your spiritual development and your spiritual life, and you just maybe want more time or you want more exposure to the spiritual space. But the reality of life sometimes doesn't make it so. So I'm not surprised that Spirit laid out my day for me today in a way that only gave me about 20 minutes of space, literally, for myself to contemplate and get ready for the conversation.
Yes. They know what they're doing. They know how to guide us. And I said, as we were chatting a little bit before we started to record, I think that's good. I think just having a very candid, raw conversation about this topic with not too much in our heads as to, what we want to hit on, and just really kind of go with it. I think that's going to end up being a beautiful conversation. So
Yeah, and I think it's an important one too for anyone that's a perfectionist or recovering perfectionist like myself. I feel in my past, I've always wanted things to be very structured. And part of my spiritual learning, part of my spiritual path is working in this divine feminine energy, which is not structured, which is a little bit more in flow, which allows spirit to come in more fluidly.
right. And that's something I've had to learn. I work a lot in my divine masculine when it comes to
Same.
business and when it comes to, all of that. And so you can feel very vulnerable allowing that divine feminine to come in a lot of these instances. And that's definitely been something that Spirit has made sure I learned, because that is a very important part. We are receiving guidance and messaging and inspiration from Spirit. And that's, you're not in control when that is. And that's not always going to be cookie cutter or it will never be exactly how you plan it. I think that's probably the best slogan for anyone starting their journey is, plan away. But there is like a saying, it's like, when you make a plan, God laughs, or something. Like, I don't remember the exact way you say it, but it's like, yeah, you plan things out, and then the universe will jump in and make a mess of it. So, and usually for our benefit.
I completely agree. I also think that there's this concept of, in the spiritual space, there's a lot of comparison, right? And there's a lot
Yeah.
of social media, and you probably follow people that you look up to in the spiritual space. You admire what they do, and likely they share a lot of what their practice looks like. And I think one of the big learnings for me is that my practice and my development is going to look very different than your development, is going to look different
Hmm.
than maybe everyone, right? It's all an
Right.
individual path, and it's an individual way for us to move forward. So it's not going to be the same for everyone. The structure is not going to be the same. The way, the time, how we serve is all going to
Yep.
look different, right? One of the things at the retreat that I loved was that you have 30 people in a space, 30 healers in a space, and not one person serves the same way
Right.
the world of spirit. We all serve
Right.
differently.
That's very true. And that, that is something I've had to learn how to navigate as well, because as having a full-time job and, working a lot. So I own my own business, and there's a lot of people that work there. There's a lot going on, and I do it all alone. And then I started developing this world, which was awesome. It just was like this, it was the energizing feeling I needed. It was like I felt lit up about something. I'm very passionate about being a hairstylist. I still love that. But this was like, oh my God, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Duh, like this makes sense. Finally, it all makes sense. And so when developing and learning how to bring that into my world, I then started following all these people online and finding those that I was attracted to, about how they presented the work or how they navigated and all of this, and then finding the ones that I didn't really align with, and all of that. And this is also like still during the pandemic, so everything was online. Social media, that's where everyone went online. And so then you kind of get this idea that, oh, if I'm not posting card pulls every other day, or if I'm not making a video about a spirit message or, this divine guidance coming through, then I must not be doing it. So there was this feeling of needing to kind of keep up with that momentum
Yeah.
of what I was seeing online. And that was intimidating. And I did my best part, but at some point, something gave. It was just I was giving too much time to some of that. And then I realized that's not the most important reason why we do this. That's, at least not for me. That's not why I began to do this path. That wasn't my initial intention. So that is something for those of you out there. Like, yes, if you're wanting to grow your audience, there is a beautiful need for social media and all of that. And there's a way to do it, in a beautiful way. There's a lot of people that do a great job at it. But if that doesn't feel right for you, don't feel the pressure that that's the only way that you could become successful in this. Something I remember, I believe it was Danielle that said once, it was like, there's a reason you're probably located where you're at the time that you're developing, because there's plenty of people around you that you probably can help, locally. And for me, that kind of felt a little more in alignment with, I really like working with people one-on-one in person. So I finally kind of was like, okay, I like to have a little bit online, but I don't have to put so much energy and so much focus on trying to make sure, I'm posting once a week, or I have a podcast myself, and even my co-host and I, we talked about, like, we just felt like we were trying to make sure we kept up with having a new episode come out constantly. And when you get followers and listeners, then that pressure builds that you have to keep them happy. And then finally we're like, you know what? That's not why we started this. We want to make sure what we're doing, that there's reason why we're doing it. We're not just putting out content just to put out content. So tell me about how you've kind of navigated that, because I'm sure you've had a similar experience.
Yeah, I feel like you and I probably started developing around the same time, right? So it
Yeah,
was
I
just
think so.
after COVID. And many of you maybe know my story or don't know my story, but I went through a big health crisis in 2017. And when I finally was feeling better, I basically needed to go back to work. So I knew when I was back at work that my life purpose was not to be this cog in a wheel for a corporation, that wasn't my life purpose. So when COVID happened and I was able to start having a little bit of space and developing online, I was also in a new corporate job that I had just started, much less intense at that moment. It gave me a lot of space to attend classes that I wanted to during the day because I had a lot of control over my calendar. Fast forward to 2024, and that company has grown tremendously, and my responsibilities have grown tremendously along with it. So I'm currently in a space where I run a team of 7 people and also sit on a leadership team in a corporate environment where most of the things that we do are online. And I don't have a lot of space in the day. So when it comes to taking a class in the Spirit School Collective, I'm really probably watching the replay because I can no longer carve out time during the day
Yeah.
to attend those classes. But where I found that I can still bring my spiritual practice into work is I think I'm in a pretty open environment. So I'm sure similar to you, Payton, that you can share your experience with your clientele and the customers that come in that you're comfortable with. I don't necessarily share with my customer base, but I do share with my team around, a lot of the work that I do in my corporate life is mentoring and helping people step into their power just in a different way, right? In a more corporate way. But I try and lead through the heart for that. And I also can gauge for people through my work with energy, my work with spirit, when people may need support that looks different than the day-to-day support that they may receive from their leader. So as an example, I think I've brought Reiki into the space or energy healing into the space, sometimes in meetings where people are just, you can tell that something needs to shift. Or I bring in, oftentimes if I'm leading something and I can tell people are just like their energy is not there, I'm like, turn off your cameras, stand up, jump around. I just try to bring different spiritual elements into that space.
I love that.
But it's been, I would say, the past 10 months have been a bit of a fast forward there in terms of picking up. I feel like the same time I started working in the Spirit School space and doing readings for Spirit School was also at the same time that my job also started to really increase at the same time. So they have been running parallel for, about the last 10 months or the last year. And it's been tricky to juggle. It has been tricky to find the same amount of space that I had at the beginning of my development to really sit in deep contemplation, to sit with my journal, to pull cards and get a sense of the energy for the day. That seems to have gone by the wayside a little bit for
Yeah.
me. And so now it feels more when I do have the space and the capacity to do that. Sometimes I'm literally cocooned on my bed with my card decks and my journal and meditating. Like I'm trying to shove it all into one day because it's like I want to fill my cup that way.
Right. Right. And I love that you brought that up because when I started this path, like I had said just a little bit ago, that once I started connecting and I started realizing this ability I was able to do, it was just like, this is me. This is truly me. This is what I want to do. I'm ready to do that now. I'm ready to jump now. Let's go now. Let's get this going. And, I accomplished a lot with that mindset
Yeah.
in a short period of time, but I lost sight a little bit about what that truly means. So as you were saying, like you've been able to bring that into your workspace and help guide people, in a way that is still that heart-centered energy space and, helping people do better and shift their energy. I remember I had this conversation with a client once when I was really early on, and I was just like, yeah, I couldn't believe this. I do this now, and it's so amazing. Let me tell you these cool stories and blah, blah, blah. And I said, the thing I love about this is, and this is true. I love the healing that it can bring. I love what we're able to gift people in that way. And she looked at me, and because I was saying it in a way that like, I can't do this doing hair. So I got to start shifting my focus because I can only do this in this space. And she looked up at me with tears in her eyes and she said, Payton, do you not realize you've been doing that this whole time? Because there were so many conversations I had with her over the years that were very helpful for her or whatever. And I didn't even realize until I learned what it felt like to focus on channeling that I had been channeling for the past 20 years doing hair. I didn't
Yeah.
realize that's what that was, that like
Yep.
when it was just like that flow of information and I just start talking and it just comes through. And so it dawned on me, I'm like, oh no, I didn't pay attention. So that was a moment that it shifted for me to like, slow down a little bit, Payton. Like this will, I do see down the road a ways. I do see my world shifting more into the spiritual space. I don't know exactly how that's going to look or how I want that to look yet, but I still do love doing hair. But that's just a shift to me that's like, I can still help people. And I don't even have to share with them that I'm a medium. I don't even have to share with them that I sometimes pick up things psychically, especially, when you're doing someone's hair, they let down their walls. It's a very vulnerable moment. It's very easy to do that, but I can still offer guidance. I can still offer that inspiration that I'm getting to help them because, people they sit in my chair and they tell me everything. It's, they come to like tell you, the worst things that have happened and, the great things that have happened. And so that would be something too, that for those of you out there that maybe have found yourself in a similar space where maybe you're having to do a job that you would rather move more into the spiritual space, or you're trying to kind of balance both, like, just remember, like, you can still offer and you can still do your spiritual work in that space that you're in. And I know Danielle has said it a few different times about they need light workers in every career, in every corner of the workforce. So don't lose your determination if it doesn't look exactly how you think it's supposed to look based upon just, what you've witnessed out there. Because this is a sacred calling. And, there's so many ways in which we can serve. And the more we do that, the more we build that relationship with spirit and make our intentions known, the more they're going to bring that into our world for us. And it will eventually start to unfold. So I think we all have to learn that, not always the smoothest way. I think
Yeah.
that's part of the path, but I think it's good. I think it's good to have these conversations and talk about it because I just think a lot of people are navigating that.
Yeah. I love that, Peyton. I love what you said about you've been doing this work longer than you even realize that you've been doing. And it took someone in your space and someone that you've known for a long time to be able to share that with you. One of the things that was interesting to me when I started developing as a medium was that I still have friends from, childhood days. And one of them said to me, "Oh, I'm not surprised at all. I've known you've been psychic your whole life." And in that moment, I was like, have I been psychic my whole life? And then you start to realize, because you have the capacity, right? Just as you said, you realize like you have been channeling spirit in your chair, right? And
Right.
I could look back at different snippets of my life where I knew I have this like innate ability, even before I was developing as a medium, to just say to the person like what they needed to hear in that moment, right?
Right.
And so that's not coming from me, that's coming from spirit,
Right.
right? But just the ability to trust what's coming into my awareness and into, I guess, through my clairs now is how I would describe it. But, 15 years ago, I wasn't calling them my clairs. I just say, I speak my mind. I speak what's
Right.
coming to my mind in the moment, whether that, always with the intention that that information is going to help the person in front of me. So I don't think that has changed. It's just the way I can receive and understand the information has changed. And I also think the way I put my declaration to spirit, specifically if I'm working in the spiritual space, that like I am open, I am here for the greatest and highest good of the person in front of me. But I also feel like I likely do that in the same it like in my space every day at work. Like I don't go in there wanting to cause harm to anyone or do what
Right.
I bring that same energy into that space, but maybe just not as open to spirit and like setting the intention that, hey, I'm open here today to serve.
Right. One thing I've been having to navigate, and I'm still like figuring out how I'm going to manage it, is as I developed spiritually and I started understanding, like you said, these gifts that I now realize I had since I was little. One thing I want to jump back to real quick before I continue down that path, because when you were talking, I remember when I first started and I was exposed to Tyler Henry, and he talked about how ever since he was a child, like he just was able to communicate. And I was just always like, God, can I ever be that good? He's got, he's already has 17 years on me or whatever it was. Like, and then that was when it was good to get that reminder that no, it's, you have been doing this your whole life. It just, you didn't know how to word it. So,
Yes.
I think that's so important to remember, that maybe you weren't aware, you didn't have the language that we use in the spiritual community, which I love to joke about how much I can't stand spiritual lingo. but maybe you didn't have the language, but that doesn't mean that spirit wasn't training you your entire life. So just don't let someone's date of when they became, they had the title medium or psychic or whatever they go under. Don't let that intimidate, what your journey should be.
Could I
But
share something quickly?
yes, please
Because
go.
it's just bringing me back to when one of my jobs, like I've been in sales for a long time. So strangers would come into my realm and come into my world, and I would be showing them around like a luxury hotel property in Whistler. And I would get clients coming in, and I would sit down with them to share a meal or something. And I would be going back to my office and say to my colleagues, why do people share this with me? Like, people would
Yeah,
share their deepest secrets, the things that were bothering them the most. And I always had some type of advice or some type of information to give them in that moment. And I think I built a lot of really great relationships because I know I was very successful in what I did, but a lot of what I was doing was not selling my product, right? It was like
right,
listening to people and offering advice and then creating this relationship with them based on what they wanted to talk about in that moment.
right,
And a
right.
lot of it was very deeply personal things
Yeah,
that then I was like giving advice to people I had never met before. But when I think back to it, I would have called it advice then, but now through like the spiritual lens, it's likely not advice. Like there's a reason,
right.
similar to when we're doing a reading, there's a reason that that particular person has chosen to book with you in that particular time and is
Exactly.
sitting in front of you, right? So it's like a
Exactly.
different lens. But that just made me realize that because I used to literally sit at my desk and say to my colleagues, like, why does this happen to me? Every time I get a client that comes from out of town, there's something that they need to talk about
Yeah,
that I wouldn't potentially share with like even some of my closest friends.
right. Yeah. Yep. We tend to forget like how spirit doesn't need us to call ourselves mediums. Spirit doesn't need us to, you know, to learn how to read cards or, runes or whatever. Spirit doesn't need us to do that. That's just to help us feel more comfortable and whatever. So I think we tend to forget, we tend to humanize it a lot. We tend to humanize like what spirit, their ability or their limitations or the way they think. We put a human mind around it a lot. And I really try to encourage people like, don't put human limitations on what spirit's capable of. So one thing that I will say that's tricky with that I have been navigating is as you get on this journey, especially if it's like a calling that you're called to, you feel lit up, you feel like you're doing your purpose, you're living in purpose. It feels so right. You want it to keep going and keep growing. Well, as I gained more awareness, more training, more development to where I started to be able to discern what is advice that's just coming in and what is a channeled message. You eventually begin to, oh, okay, now I can feel that subtle difference as to where my awareness is when this information comes to me. As that goes, it's also a healing journey. As we all know, you're going to start healing a bunch of stuff you have going on in your life, and that's going to help raise your vibration. There's a spiritual lingo, but that's the audience, right? They know what I'm talking about. As you begin to do that, you probably will begin to notice relationships changing, things that you're interested in doing changing, ways that you manage stress. Everything in your world begins to change. And from what I can see so far, it's usually for the better. So I was noticing me personally with my business, I was having a harder time having some of these kind of surfacey conversations with clients. And I was having a harder time as my abilities were strengthening. I started to kind of really pick up on some inauthenticity with some things I was being told, or so I was really having to adjust even what I was comfortable being in. And I even would notice that just the stresses of owning a business and managing people, a lot of days it ruins my day. And And a lot of times that has nothing to do with the people, they're just human, and you can't get mad at them. It's just like, when you're the leader, when you're the manager, when you're the owner, whatever, you have to navigate it. Sometimes it's like herding cats, it's a lot. And it would ruin my day, and it would put me into such a different energetic mindset that I'm like, well, I've now know what it's like to be in this like higher vibration. I know what it's like to be feeling more joy and more happiness, and I want to be more in that space. I realize I came here to be human, and that is not, none of us are ever going to live fully in that space, but I want to put more energy there. And I don't want to put myself in situations that are going to cause me to shift too far away from that. So then that's where my struggle has been, kind of like, how do I develop this new world with either transitioning out of or finding another way to manage my current world? And how do I do that appropriately? And then I don't know, it can get really lonely. I know that gets talked about a lot for a lot of different reasons, because so much does change. But that's difficult when, this is your income. This is the world you've created, whether you own a business or you have a corporate role and you work for a company, or however that is. It's it's how we survive. It's how we pay our bills. It's how we manage our world. So have you experienced that? Do you have any guidance on that? I mean, I'm still like swimming through the mud of that, but
Yeah. I feel that very deeply, right? I feel that I feel I'm also in a similar position where when I'm doing my spirit work and when I'm connecting to spirit, I'm just in such, like, my heart is happy, my soul is happy. I can feel my light shining, right? It's just a different state of being. And then when I'm in my corporate life, and if that gets busy, I can feel frustrated. It can start to drain my energy a little bit. So I'm not sure, Peyton, I have the answer of like how to navigate through that, because I also am in a similar position, right? Where 8 hours of my day, most of my day, are spent maybe not feeling as much joy and feeling as much fulfillment, and that I'm living my purpose. And I do see a path where I'm living more in my purpose and living more, the spiritual lingo that I really don't like is alignment, but I'm like, what is the other word that
right.
I can use for that in this moment? But I know what it feels like to be in the space where I authentically feel like I'm living my best life. But I think you just touched on this as well, is that like spirit reminding me that I'm here to have a human experience. I'm
Right.
here to have this very dense existence. And I don't want to say that in a negative way, but when I feel
Right.
very much human, it feels heavier. It feels like I'm not as light. I don't feel my light shining as much as when I'm working in spirit work. And so I feel like that's part of the journey for light workers, is that we have to be able to navigate both. We have to be able to navigate the human, and we have to be able to navigate that enlightened state, because we also have to manage in our lives things that don't feel great, things in the world that are not feeling great. I mean, we have to have the duality, right? We
Right.
have to have both. We have to have the human experience, and we have to have this ability to like see our purpose and our soul's light. And I think you touched on this, right? You touched on this journey that we have as light workers and as wanting to work with spirit. We also have to heal a lot of things along the way, right? And
Right.
we evolve further along the way. And with that does come leaving some relationships behind, or how we have dealt with things in the past behind. Like, I know for myself, I deal with stress so much differently now than I did like 4 or 5 years ago. I mean, I'm much more apt to grab a book, grab a deck of cards than I am to like grab a glass of wine. I mean, I still love
Yeah.
wine, but it's like way that I can navigate through that has changed, right? And so I don't know that I have the answer. I feel like spirit wants us to be experiencing both. And I feel like part of our ability to connect into this like divine consciousness is the ability to recognize both.
Right. And I think that is the answer. I think that just might not be the answer that, we want to hear, because we all would like the easier road out. But and it's been a juggle for me, because as time has gone on, I can do 10, 12 clients a day and I'm exhausted, but it's physical exhaustion. If I do 3 readings in a day, I'm drained in a whole nother way. So I'm like, I can't bring home the same amount of revenue doing readings as I do doing hair every day. Like I can't work in the same way. So that's not realistic. And, so that was something I had to kind of pay attention to early on. And then, as you were saying, I personally just kind of went through a little dark night of the soul. And as I felt disconnected and went through all of that, I learned that, like you just said, we came here. We remembered what we came here to have a human experience. That's what we signed up for, whether or not we're working spiritually or not. And in some of those moments of just being super in my human, at the other side of that, I'm feeling like I gained so much more strength in my spiritual world than, uh, you know, in different ways than I do when I do a development course or I'm pulling cards every day or I'm doing a reading. I mean, that stuff lights me up so much, but I still gained a lot of support in my spiritual practice just by stepping away from it for a minute, just by going through the feels and dealing with, some of that stuff spirits bringing up to, finally get us to heal and walk through and grow from there. So that's another thing I like to kind of support people in is don't lose faith if you're not feeling very faithful. Don't give up if you just feel like you can't connect for a while. It's okay. There's probably a reason for it, and that's okay. And spirit's not going anywhere. Just as we were saying, spirit was around our whole lives and we didn't even realize that. So just because now we know what it feels like and they might air quote here disappear for a minute, they haven't gone anywhere. It's still there. So
What a
yeah,
beautiful, sorry, I didn't mean to
go ahead.
interrupt you, but what a beautiful way to have your journey also unfold, right? To be able to go into, I mean, it's not beautiful that you went into a dark night of the soul, but it's beautiful to be able to come out of that and understand that your connection to spirit and your ability and your want to serve with purpose for your light purpose, I'm going to say your light's
Right.
purpose, didn't change, right? In
Right.
fact, it got a little bit stronger, right? So it's so beautiful that, maybe early on in the development, I know I had some, like, I don't want to say hiccups, but times early on in my development where I can remember very clearly putting so much pressure on myself in readings. And this is like in practice readings, right? So much pressure on myself that I was in a reading and I was almost crying because I was so like just wanting to get the evidence and wanting to bring forward the information. And you cannot connect in a state when you're putting so much pressure on yourself, and B, like just wanting that I felt like I was very much in my ego mind. And I needed to take a break for probably, I bet it was 4 or 5 months before I did another practice reading. And when I went back, it was better than before. And I also, an important lesson for myself to realize that I needed to be in a state of joy, in a state of like wanting to serve the world of spirit through like a really pure lens, as opposed to striving for something.
Yep. And it is such a balance too. And learning, I think that's kind of what we're both getting at here is like spirit's going to walk you and teach you and how to kind of balance all of that in your world as you're growing and connecting. Because as I said to you before, but we got on here, like the longer I was disconnected and the longer I had time away from it, it was almost like, how do I want to put that? Like you get so filled up by doing this work. It's not a drug. I don't like to compare it to that because that doesn't have a positive connotation, but it's like, I always joke. I'm like, I will never buy a first class ticket because once I know what it's like to fly first class, I will never be able to go back and I can't afford that lifestyle. So it's kind of like, I connected with spirit. I rode first class, so when I had to step away from it, that was hard. And then you can kind of get stuck in that hamster wheel of hard. And then I didn't realize that, once I kind of got over that hill and I started reading again, I was like, oh my God, I needed this. I just needed to do a reading. I just needed to like I probably should have tried to connect a little sooner just to kind of, because it does refill up your cup. So it's like learning that balance of how to appropriately manage this throughout your life, throughout your career, throughout your development, and however that goes. So it's a road, and there is no rule book. I mean, we're here giving our advice and kind of, sharing the experiences we have, and but everyone, you're going to have your own specific journey, and don't be too hard on yourself. Don't compare yourself to how someone else's journey has went, how someone else, says this should or shouldn't work for you.
Yes.
There's a lot of opinions out there, and there's a saying about that too, but I'm not gonna. We all know what that is. I don't need to say it, but um, it's a personal thing, and get some tools in your belt. Get some good guidance that's out there, and then figure out how it works for you. And
Yes.
that takes some surrendering, and that usually that takes a lot of healing of self-worth and stuff, because
Yeah.
most of us have to navigate self-worth issues, because why would we be able to do this? Why am I good enough to be able to tell someone who I'm talking to, I'm talking to their loved one, or who am I to do this? And once you kind of heal some of that, then you learn that, like, I can do this. I'm able to do this. I'm worthy of doing this, and I can figure out how this works for me.
Yeah, I love that, Peyton. And I think one of the beautiful things that comes with that as well is that as we heal those things within ourselves, like the unworthiness, the imposter syndrome, we're able to take that healing into other spaces, right? So
Right.
when we think about like how does this work if we are in corporate or we're working full time, as we heal those things, the way that we present and the way that we show up in the world is different. And that can be that can be enough to trigger into someone else that, like, wait, a couple of months ago when she did that presentation, she wasn't in the same, she was like not as confident in what was coming forward, right? So it's like that will bleed as you heal those things, it will bleed into other areas of your
Yes.
life, that even though you may not be in the spiritual space doing spiritual work, that other people are watching, right? And that may just like spark something inside of them that gets them to uncover something in themselves that they want to see present differently, right?
Right.
Because
Right.
ultimately we're healing things all through our lives, and I think as people witness that healing and that growth, it inspires something in them that maybe they want to
Right.
heal and maybe they want to do differently.
Right.
I was walking this morning and asking spirit to really show up for me, because as I was mentioning at the onset of this episode, that in my masculine, I would have had questions for you and I would have been very organized for this conversation. So this morning to spirit on my walk with the pups, I asked, what do I need to share? What do you want me to share? And the response I got back quite quickly was to just be present in the moment, right? What can we control regardless of like what our situation is and how busy we are? We can be present in the moment with whatever we are doing, and that there's this idea sometimes that 20 minutes of meditation or an hour sitting in the power is what we need, when really, if we have 2 minutes to close our eyes and focus on our breathing and reset our energy and reset our thought patterns, like that's really all it takes, right? Especially if we have been developing or we have a more detailed practice, that if we can dip into it, amazing. But what if we can't, right? We can set the intention. One of the things I brought back from the Sacred Spirit Retreat was that I can make little moments sacred, and I can wake up in the morning and tell myself, I'm going to have a really fantastic day. It's going to be fucking amazing. And, that's going to set the tone for my day. And then I think the third thing that Spirit sort of brought forward was, just because we are busy, or that because I am busy right now, it doesn't make me any less worthy of a spiritual path. So those
Right.
three things that I was delivered this morning, I'm like, that was such a gift, right? That as long as I'm present, as long as I'm bringing myself back to the present moment and back to my own energy and being able to reset myself, and also just knowing that I'm worthy of the path, regardless of what other chaos might be going on around me, is enough for me in this moment. It has to be enough, because that's what I have time for in this moment. And it doesn't mean in a month's time I might have a week off. I do have a week off. And believe me, I will be meditating and journaling and pulling all the cards and doing all the things that really light me up. But what can I do in the meantime? I just have to ride what's in front of me.
Right. Thank you so much for that. I'm very grateful you brought that through today, because I've had Spirit recently remind me, like, make sure to meditate. You need, it is very beneficial to our practice to just meditate. It's just beneficial, not even to our practice. It's beneficial to us as humans to just take some time to quiet your mind. But I'm always like, my number's 39. That's my spirit number. That's Spirit always shows me 39 in some form. So I meditate for 39 minutes. That's what I do. And I'm like, well, I don't have 39 minutes. I don't have that, I don't have that time slot. So I just won't today, And so when you said that, if you have 2 minutes, take 2 minutes. I'm like, thank you, because why do I put these parameters around what it has to look like? We all do it. So thank you for that. I needed all of that today.
I'm glad it was helpful. It was helpful for
Yes.
me.
Yeah.
It was really helpful for me. And I mean, ultimately, I would love 39 minutes. Sometimes I don't have 39
Right.
minutes.
Right.
So I'll take 2.
Yeah. To have 39 minutes, I can't do it that often. Maybe that's some subconscious thing I've put up so that I don't, I just feel like my day, that's one thing when you're working constantly and you're trying to build all these things. It's like my entire day. And that's what I did for the first couple of years of this. It was like every minute of every day was filled with something. I had the gym, I had my job, I had the development, I had the courses I was doing, I had the readings I was doing. And I'm a manifesting generator, sacral energy nonstop. I can just go, 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 go. And I got burnt out. And, it happens. So just taking time, even when you're busy, and just going easier on ourselves, I think is a great message about all of this. So I thank you so much for asking me to do this episode. I feel it was a great conversation. I think a lot of people are going to gain a lot from it. I think hopefully it will help a lot of people. I would love to throw out there, any of you listening, especially if you're part of the Spirit School community, or if not, and if you have an experience around this, or if you have a story that you would like to share about what your journey has been through balancing your work life and your spiritual life, or some things that you've witnessed or experienced, we would love to hear from you. So please feel free to find us in the Spirit School community. We're on social media, Instagram, all the things. You can find us pretty easily out there. You can find us also on the squamishmedium.com, the Spirit School's website. We're out there. So yeah, please reach out, and we would love to hear your stories and your experiences.
Thank you so much, Payton, for the conversation. Always great to connect with you, my friend. And I'm so grateful for this conversation, and so grateful for all the listeners. And yeah, as Payton said, reach out if there's any questions or you have a different experience or something you want to add to the conversation.
Awesome. All right. We will see you all again soon.
Did you know that Spirit School is not just a podcast? It's an actual school. If you go to myspiritschool.com, you can invest in self-study courses, live programs, and of course the Spirit School Collective, my baby, my monthly membership community. All Spirit School offerings are intended to get you feeling clear, confident, and connected to your spiritual path, your development journey, and of course, connected to other spiritual curious souls who are having similar experiences to you. I hope to see you in Spirit School.